and squeeze your juice to brew our tea. Your body more, we stand out here, the spicy ale and foaming beer. We know by the moon, we know by the sky, we're not too soon and we're not too high. We know by the star and we know by the ground, we're not too far and we know that sound.
And in this podcast we're going to be brewing some witches' potions and brews that we haven't covered in previous podcasts. Now, this podcast was going to be reserved solely for our website, but now that the Facebook page of the New Forest Pagans is fluff free, I think we can put it on there without too much worry. The reason I say that is because the Hearth of the Orwood is an old craft coven, and some of the practices and some of the things we do and use perhaps are not for everybody. So this is just a podcast, take it or leave it. You don't have to use this. This isn't the only way of using these things. It's just something that we do and we thought you might find interesting. Now, the title of this podcast is Brews for Ritual and Celebration. Well, we're going to start off with celebration, and we're witches, so there's loads of celebrations. I mean, I'm filming this now and it's coming up to Yule, brilliant celebration. But then we're witches, so we've got Beltane, excellent, brilliant time for a celebration. Summer solstice, Samhain, all of them really are celebrations. So some of these things can be used for any or all of those. And the first one we're going to start off with is a strange sounding one called Pilsenkraut, which is German sounding. Basically what it means is, if you translate it, Pilsen in old German means to have visions, and Kraut is simply plant, so it's a plant that gives visions. So what we're going to make is a beer. Brilliant, Germans love beer, so do we, but ours is slightly different. But we're not going to make an ordinary beer. This is the beer that was brewed before hops came into account, and people used hops and barley and the like in beers. Now we're going to use a henbane beer. Now this is henbane, we've seen it before, use it in all sorts of things, flying ointments, various other things, and it contains scopolamine. Now this is fine if you want to use it in a beer. What I would suggest is you don't substitute this for anything else. Some people substitute mandrake or even belladonna. I wouldn't advise it. Belladonna and mandrake both contain atropine, which is not something you want to ingest in any quantity. Henbane beer is not for everyone, it's a mind altering thing, so take it or leave it. But how do you make it? Very simple. To those of you who brew home brews anyway, it's a piece of cake. But basically what you need, the recipe is 20 litres of water, 1 litre of malt, half a litre of your favourite honey, 40 grams of dried henbane leaf, and some yeast for a beer. Now how do you do it? Well, it's easy. First of all, you need a big pot. Something like this we would use, or if you're jam maker, big jam preserve pot. Anything that will hold 20 litres plus of fluid basically. So then all you do is you put about 15 litres of water in your big pot and you mix in your henbane. Now henbane comes, when it's dried, I don't know if you can see that very well, in lumps and bumps. It's best to trim this up so that you don't have too much sticky stuff. Chop it up, trim it down, not too tiny, but so that you get the woody bit out. Really what you want is the leaves for this, not the stalks or anything, or no root, just the leaves. Chop it up, not too finely, fairly coarsely. Pop it in your water that is gently simmering, and you simmer that for 5 to 10 minutes. Don't let it boil or you'll boil away all the goodness in it, but simmer it nicely for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now while you're doing that, take the remainder of your water, which is 4 or 5 litres of it, that has been warmed, and you add and dissolve your malt. Now that's not too difficult to do, just pour it in, stir it up and let that dissolve. Add your honey. Similarly, stir it all up until it's dissolved, which is why that extra water needs to be warm, otherwise you won't dissolve your honey. Then simply pour it all into your big pot, it's still simmering gently. Add your yeast, stir it all up. Having done that, then all you do is you put it in a container, a big bucket with a lid, not sealed. When it ferments, if you seal it, it'll just explode on you and you'll have beer everywhere. So in a bucket with a lid so that nothing else gets in it, but so that it can ferment and bubble away and nothing is going to happen to it. It's very quick. This isn't like home brew that takes months. This takes 4 or 5 days if it's kept in a warm place to ferment properly. Then simply you chill it and serve it as you would with a beer. And it's the sort of beer you would use, talking of which, in the best traditions. Here's some I made earlier, and I'll enjoy this while you're just stood there watching. Sorry about that, but it's very nice, excuse me. Stunning stuff. That is served basically at celebrations. It's not the sort of thing you'd want to sit around and drink on your own particularly, but when you're in celebrations, after a major ritual, something like that, when you're having the cakes and the wine, relax with a pint of that, and very nice indeed. Right, so that's one of the brews. The next thing we're going to talk about is teas and how to make them. Well, as a coven, we use all sorts of teas, and they're used mostly in ritual for various things. To aid with trance work, to aid with scrying or divining. They're all gently mind-altering things, and to be fair, most of them don't taste wondrous. Now, the ones we use the most are skullcap and mugwort. Well, both of which you can get fairly simply. Mugwort grows almost anywhere, and skullcap you can buy in various garden centres if you're lucky, especially the ones that specialise in herbs. Now this is mugwort, and you're going to make a tea out of it. Well, basically you're using this instead of a tea bag, so you want similar sort of quantities. If you're going to do, say there's 6 of you having some tea because you want to do some scrying or whatever, you would use perhaps 3 proper tea bags, wouldn't you, for 6 people's cups of tea. Well, here you would use the equivalent amount in the herb, and this is easy enough. You just chop it up so it's nice and fine, and you infuse it in hot water. So if you're, because we're old craft, we always work outside, so what we simply do is mix it up as you would a tea and add it to a thermos flask and take it with you. These teas are quite safe. You can have 2 or 3 cups of this, and it just gently transforms your mind into something that is attuned to the spirits of the land, so that you can actually scry or divine without too much effort, and it's a lovely way of doing journeying, for instance. So simply chop it up, pour it in, pour some hot water on it as you would tea, preferably not totally boiling, stir it up, and I would, because none of this stuff is wondrous tasting, I would add some sugar, whether you take sugar or not. I would say probably at least 2 spoonfuls per large cup of mugwort tea. 2 cups of that takes about an hour, and then you'll be doing some fantastic scrying. And the same can be used, you can use all sorts of things in these teas. We use mostly skullcap or mugwort, but you can use wormwood as well, and wormwood is an excellent one for scrying. So feel free to use those. The only thing I would say about wormwood is it tastes pretty unpleasant. It's very, very bitter. So it's the sort of thing you want to drink quickly. It's not a tea you sit and sup while you're having a chat. I would get on with it because wormwood tastes foul. Skullcap and mugwort, with a bit of sugar in, actually don't taste bad at all. They're quite pleasant, especially if you're in a group, in a ritual situation where you're drinking tea. It's great. It doesn't taste bad at all. Now, lots of people get very strange ideas about mind-altering chemicals and drugs and herbs. Every herb that we use as a coven is grown in this country, quite legally. All of them grow naturally, some of them more so than others, but they're all available in this country from the wild or from garden centres. And the one we're going to talk about now, which is a different kettle of fish altogether, is fly agaric. Now, lots of people talk to me about fly agaric, about what you use, how you use it, and all sorts of things. Now, you can make it in a tea, exactly the same way as you would make mugwort. The drawback is this tastes pretty grim too. It's not the taste you're after, it's the effect. But fly agaric, especially for journeying in ritual situations, is wonderful. So how do you use it? Well, first of all, you've got to make sure you've got the right one. Now, this is fly agaric mushroom. It's the epitome of what you think of as fairy mushrooms. It's bright red, white spots on, perfect fairy toadstool you see in all the nursery rhymes. Now, if you're out in the country and you're picking these, Try not to pick too many because they're not that common. And you'll waste most of them, so please don't. Take a few if you must. And if you must take them, cut them with a knife. Don't pull them up. Leave the little the root ball in, and that will come up again. These aren't annuals, these come up all the time. They keep coming up. But if you take the root, they won't. So cut them rather than pull them up, please. Now, this one weighs about 5 grams once dried, and that's about the starting quantity you want to use for one of these. Now, drying them is fairly easy. We're quite lucky because we have the facility to do it here, but if you haven't, what you want to do is get your fresh mushroom, having cut it, not picked it, put it on a baking tray with probably a bit of silver foil on there, and put it in an oven. And you don't want the oven any hotter than about 110 degrees, no hotter, and you want to put it in there 10, maybe 20 minutes, depends on the mushroom and what condition it's in, but you want it dry, you don't want it cooked. Cooked mushrooms, you're wasting your time. So dried but not cooked. Some people try putting them in the airing cupboard, but I'm afraid these have got high water content, and unless your airing cupboard is really warm, they're just going to rot, and that's going to be pointless. So, having got your dried fly agaric, what do we do here? Well, you can make teas as I suggested, but the best way of dealing with it is to chop them up. Now these need to be ground very hard, because you're going to mix them all up. Now, there is some argument about what part of this you should use, what part you shouldn't. All of it has the psychedelic chemicals in that you need. The red skin is probably the highest potency, closely followed by the actual mushroom itself, and the stalk is last. But rather than be too prim and proper about it, we just use it all and mix it all up so that it's nicely done. Now, how am I going to use this? Not quite chopped up. It's got to be fine. What you don't want is bits. You want it fine, so that when you pick it up, it powders. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but that's basically what you want. Now, how much of this do you want to use? Well, if you've never used it before, and I would stress this should be used in ritual. It's not just a fun thing. People do use it for fun, I guess, but basically it's used in ritual to aid contact with the ancestors, for journeying, anything where you want to feel totally in tune with nature and the countryside you're in, which is why I would suggest it's always used outside in ritual and never on your own, always used with somebody keeping safe. If you're doing journeying outside, you should have someone there as guardian anyway, so that goes without saying really. How much you use? Depends who you are, how big you are, what you're used to. I would suggest you use somewhere between 1 and 5 grams as a starting point, no more. It takes about an hour to take effect. If you don't get any effect after an hour, try another 1 to 5 grams. The usual dose would be something like 5 to 10 grams, which is of dried, is sort of a whole cap really, but I wouldn't suggest for a first time out you try that. So try a small bit, and how do you do it? Simple. You take your, I'm going to take a tiny little bit rather than a lot. You take your 1 to 5 grams of powdered stuff, you take a glass of water, you put it in your hand, throw it in your mouth, swallow. Done. Easy peasy. Now, I'm not going to be flying anywhere at the minute because I've had a tiny little bit, but as I say, it's something that's worth doing. It's something that most people ask about. Fly agaric is known, everybody thinks fly agaric is terribly poisonous, and reality is it is mildly poisonous, I suppose. It would be poisonous, fatally so if you took way too much, but it's not one of the most notorious mushrooms. It just looks like it is because it's such a vivid colour. And it's a brilliant thing to use. Now, all of these are worth doing. Have a go. Most of them you can go. I mean, the fly agaric, you can just, you're a bit late now, you might just find some. November's usually the time you see that growing, particularly under silver birch or under pine. They love the ground under there. But so it's places, sort of heathlandy places you'll find it, all woods, but it needs to be predominantly pine forest with some silver birch in if you're going to do that. Mugwort skullcap tea, give it a go. That's got to be worth a go. It's lovely to use. It doesn't taste great. It tastes like sort of strong tea, and I don't actually like tea very much. But You could add it to a cup of tea if you wanted to, so that you've got a bit more flavour to it, but flavour isn't what it's all about. It's about using these to commune with the spirits of the land and to get you closer to the old gods. So I guess that's about, I've covered just about everything I need to cover in this one, so I hope it has answered a few questions. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.